Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining today. We're super excited to have you here. I'm Francis. I'm the co-founder and chief product officer at MadKudu. For those who don't know, at MadKudu, we help B2B companies grow better by activating their data. And over the years, I've been fortunate to work with a lot of go-to-market teams from companies ranging from like the MongoDBs, Figma, Shopify, and of course, Lucid, which we'll talk about today, just to name a few. And I feel like in recent conversations with CMOs and C-levels at our customers, I think there's been a consensus that the party's over. If we look at kind of like 2023, I mean, the market has been brutal for public companies. Like private companies are struggling as well. We're seeing valuations kind of drop. And I think if we can all agree that if 2022 was the year of growth at all costs, 2023 is really going to be the year about efficient growth. That's all great to say, and every boardroom is talking about this, but now the question is like, how do we actually do something about it? And I think the story we'll hear about today from Peter, who's subbing in for TJ, who unfortunately couldn't show up today, is really, I think, a great example of that, of how we can do more with less and how do we extract more value from what we already have at hand. And so Peter ran MOPS at Lucid, and he was actually the person who spearheaded the project that we're going to be talking about today. I think I can easily say he's one of the best MOPS professionals I've ever met. He combines like uncannily, I would say, like technical chops, but also the ability to think strategically, and I think we'll see quite a bit of that today. And maybe to give you a sense of what we'll walk you through, like given the title, right? The kind of like big takeaways that we want to leave you with today is that like data really in this day and age has to be used as an alignment tool. It's more than just like a resource. It's really something that you can use for alignment, especially between sales and marketing. We'll talk also about why at Lucid, which has like millions of active users, like very strong B2C funnels, B2C has limitations, and we have to think at an account level context when we're doing B2B and when we're trying to extract more value from large user bases that we might have. And as a consequence of that, we'll talk about the need for hybrid funnels, right? Which is really meeting our users where they're at. Like not everyone wants to sign up for a product. Not everyone wants to be cold outbounded by a rep. And so really understanding what the different user affinities are to your different motions is critical to make sure that you have success within your account motion. But that's enough of me talking. So without further ado, Peter, if you want to take it away.
Cool. Thanks, Francis. Hope you guys are doing well today. As Francis mentioned, I formerly headed up marketing operations at Lucid Software. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the Lucid name, Lucid is a visual collaboration suite. So we offer 3 products. Lucid Chart, Lucid Spark, and Lucid Scale all have very different use cases. And for a number of years, Lucid Chart was our primary product. So I would bet that many of your companies have a Lucid Chart account somewhere, and maybe your users yourselves. If you aren't familiar with Lucid, feel free to check out the site. I'll stomp my pitch there for registering. And at Lucid, there are 2 main funnels. You can think about them as a B2C funnel and a B2B funnel. We call them the unassisted and the sales-assisted funnel. And on the unassisted side, we're attracting visitors to our websites. We are then trying to get them to use our products. A lot of people register for free and start to get some aha moments there. And then we move those people, as many as we can, to subscribe. So they're actually paying us for using various Lucid products. Then on the B2B side, or the sales-assisted piece, we have leads, which we're generating through different demand gen activities. And we have a bunch of users that are coming from the B2C funnel. From there, we have marketing qualified leads and product qualified leads, or PQLs. And then we help our sales team identify sales qualified opportunities and then move those to closed won. Like Francis mentioned, the big kicker here is that we're generating 1 million new signups every month. Just a ton of data to sift through. And that's on top of tens of millions of users already in our database. So ultimately, it's like there's just so much that we need to be able to be very systematic in the way that we identify insights and figure out what accounts to target. This really ties into our product-led growth goal, which is to generate pipeline from all of these new signups and all of these users that we already have in our database. There are kind of two embedded goals. One is trying to combine those two different funnels. A B2C motion is really different than a B2B motion. So how do we make those work better together? And then on top of that, really improving the way that our sellers engage with accounts. So they're not just reaching out to every sign up, they're able to engage with people with the right message at the right time and really know who to go after in the first place. Does everyone know what a PQL is? Product Qualified Lead, show of hands. Got it? All right. So what we were doing at Lucid a couple years ago is we had this homegrown PQL system. We originally were using single activity PQLs, so someone exports a document, we PQL them. We moved to a solution where we built a model using a bunch of SQL queries that we would then replicate in Marketo. And after about 6 months of having that live, while we were surfacing PQLs that were better than before, it's really challenging to keep that thing alive. It's more of like a Frankenstein monster, less of like a well-oiled machine. So the first piece here is that MAPs are just not meant to handle a high volume of product data. If any of you have tried to update millions of records in HubSpot or Marketo, it's kind of brittle. Another piece as well is that it was really time consuming for us to iterate. So we have really capable analysts at Lucid, really capable engineers, but to really find the right signals and iterate on models a bunch of times in quarter just takes so much time. We're spending about 100 hours a quarter on model iterations, which is way too much. And the third piece is that even though we're putting in so much effort, our sales team felt like we had a black box model and we weren't giving enough insights about the PQLs we were sending them for them to actually take action. What we ended up doing is we partnered with the MadKudu team to really make good on all of these problems. You can see here is just a screenshot from Salesforce of some of the insights that we're able to share with sellers. And we really I'm really proud of this, honestly. We're able to share what exactly people are doing in product in a curated way. So instead of having a list of like, here's every single time someone has shared a document, instead we can call out some of the highest value activities, and we can also enrich some additional signals. So we know that this person works at a company that's using AWS, which is something that we can integrate with. So a lot more value here, and this really allowed us to build more trust with sales. Like Francis mentioned, data is an alignment tool, and being able to have marketers and sales folks looking at the same insights was a big win for us. Coming out of this project, we were able to do a few things, one of which was having a much happier Marketo instance. So instead of having like the inability to send emails exactly when we wanted to, instead we were able to do everything we needed to with Marketo. We're also able to shorten the amount of time it took to iterate on our models and signals. So if a sales rep was like, hey, this signal that someone loaded a shape library doesn't really help me out, we could make adjustments within MadKudu within about a week and push that live for all sales reps. Because of this additional trust, sellers were really engaging with the PQLs we were sending them. So we saw a relative 80% increase in PQL attempt rate and a pretty significant increase in pipeline generated from PQLs as well. Yeah, trust is really huge. The next challenge that we're facing is that while we had made PQLs a lot better, our competitors were doing a lot of the same things. And some of our competitors were starting to sell top down a lot better than we were. We have this really massive groundswell motion where people are transacting on their own. A lot of our sales reps are able to consolidate accounts very quickly, cross-sell easily. But we weren't able to engage with executives at key accounts and really drive strategic conversations that would allow us to sell bigger deals. So what we wanted to do is move to the account level so that we weren't stuck selling person to person. Instead, we could really land these bigger deals like I mentioned. The tough part is, say like maybe a named account like Disney or something, might have a couple active users, but that doesn't mean that they're ready for us to engage with them. It's really hard for us to compare different accounts apples to apples on any sort of metric besides just like total number of active users. This is compounded by a few different factors. So our sellers own a lot of accounts. Sometimes a seller might own up to 1,000 accounts, and that's way too many for them to engage with in any given quarter. Additionally, account research takes a lot of time. So a seller finds that they want to reach out to one account, but then they need to look in a few different dashboards. They need to look in Salesforce, Zoom Info, LinkedIn Sales Nav. It's just too much to really get through and be their own analyst. And the last piece here is that account selection shared between marketing and sales is really subjective. We're using some high-level metrics to understand which accounts we should chase after, but there, again, really wasn't a way to compare Disney versus Apple versus some obscure software company that might actually want to pay us a lot of money. We did a similar sort of thing here. So taking learnings from updating our PQL motion, we aggregated a lot of user-level insights to the account level, and then we tried to layer in some additional insights that would help our sellers have those strategic conversations. So you can see here, we know that there are 5 directors on the account. We know that the company is using GCP. They're hiring and engineering. And then down in the behaviors, we can see they're using cloud shapes. This might be like all terminology that you're not super familiar with, but to me, this means that there's a great Lucid scale use case at this account, and it's easy for a seller to know what sorts of conversation topics are going to be most pertinent as they're probably gearing up for some sort of cloud infrastructure revamp or something that we can probably help with. We can also score accounts on a 0 to 100 scale. So instead of us coming up with some sort of matrix and saying an account is a 2A or they scored 570 points, we're able to true things up in a way that our reps really easily understood. As we dug in a bit deeper with our sales pilot group, there's some plays that started to emerge. So at Lucid, we were really into consolidating accounts where, say, there are like a few different teams that are using Lucid Chart at the same company. We could talk to an IT admin and say, there are all of these accounts. Why don't we roll them up into a bigger account, and then we can sell some additional seats. But what happened when we dug deeper is that we started to see that we could cross-sell. You can see it here. We can cross-sell Lucid Chart, Lucid Spark, and Lucid Scale based on how active different users are in those products, as well as look at some nascent demand. So maybe there's an account that's using Lucid Chart, but they're getting a lot of Lucid Spark license requests. Maybe a play that we can run to cross-sell and take advantage of that. Additionally, and you'll see this in a later slide, we found that using this data, we could identify some competitors that we didn't already know were working with an account. So here, Miro is showing up in the signals. Miro is like a big competitor with Lucid, and we could start a conversation around what a company was using Miro for, and maybe see if there's some way that we could penetrate as well. Big things here, we were able to find that by implementing this account scoring methodology, we identified the right accounts. So we found accounts that ultimately grew their ARR. We also saw that sellers shifted their focus from accounts that were more of a distraction to accounts that were a lot more impactful on quota attainment. And the last piece here is that sellers did in fact find that ARR. And average ARR increased on high scoring accounts by more than 20%, which we love to see. So just by using data as this alignment tool between sales and marketing, we're able to help sellers focus their time where it mattered most and generate more revenue for the business and for themselves too. Additionally, and love to get some shout outs from some salespeople as well. We had a couple examples where this one guy was really close to hitting his quota. He was part of the sales pilot group that we worked with on account scoring, and he found a deal on an account he had never engaged with for $10,000 and closed it in 3 days. It's pretty awesome. On top of that, I mentioned rip and replace with Miro already. But some sales leaders were able to find some additional use cases. So we had some sales leaders start to use this data in quarterly planning and push their reps to identify which accounts they should go after, which plays they should run, and which people they should reach out to, which we love to see. Ultimately, to summarize here, we're able to really up-level the way that we identified PQLs and surfaced them to our sales team. We were able to increase ARR on accounts, and we're also really able to change behavior within our sales org, all just by creating data and surfacing it in an actionable way, and really cutting out the black box that we had built before. The newest challenge here is really more on the marketing side. So we've created all of this data, we've helped sellers see the value in it, and now we need to use it more ourselves. So we know which accounts sellers are going to go after, and now we can start to turn our attention to accounts that need more users, need more engagement. We can also start to use this data in tools like metadata and Sendoso to orchestrate really effective campaigns. So we can automatically identify if a specific account is high scoring, and if we don't have a buyer on that account, then we can start to enroll people in a campaign to help us identify that buyer instead of just sending the same messaging to that account, trying to get people to register. A lot of interesting things that we can do here. And again, just by using the same data as our sales team, we don't need to have a conversation about which accounts we should go after, which ones we shouldn't, how different groups of accounts are doing. Instead, we can just automate where all of this data flows, so it's really easy for our tools to ingest. Awesome. Pass it back to you, Francis.
Yeah. Sweet. Thank you, Peter. So I think what's really interesting about the Lucid kind of story is that ultimately it isn't that crazy. I think they definitely have numbers that are out of this world, right? Not everyone is lucky to have tens of millions of active users on a monthly basis. But what was really interesting was to see that even with that scale, the reps were still struggling to find opportunities, and just surfacing stuff that was relevant to them was super, super helpful, and it got a lot of engagement. It got the sales team to be excited to work with marketing again. When Peter started playing around with the tool and shipping new versions of the signals, all of a sudden the reps were sending him feedback, which historically the reps were kind of complaining in their corner of God damn it, marketing is doing another thing, and it's going to be exciting for a month and then we're going to be over with it. This really brought the teams together, and it kind of started this motion where they felt like they could give feedback, and the marketing team had to figure out like, how are people selling? Like, it's great to say, hey, this account is engaged, but what does it mean beyond the fact that they're engaged? Like, how do we actually get to close that account? Like, who are the people, the decision makers, who are the champions, and all those components? And that's maybe the part that I'll leave you with. One of the analogies that I love to use is the Lord of the Rings. So the cool thing, and this is kind of a chart that represents the storyline of the Lord of the Rings from start to finish with all the different characters, where you'll have like the hobbits up here. And what this is kind of saying is that it's like the Lord of the Rings is like ultimately a pretty simple story, right? It's a fellowship that gets together and they decide to destroy a ring in a volcano. Like, it's pretty straightforward, right? But then the story becomes really intricate with like everyone playing different pieces. The fellowship kind of splits up. People go in one direction and others. And the way I look at it from a B2B perspective is like, that's kind of the purchase cycle from an account, right? So you have Gandalf, who's kind of the instigator of all of this. He's the guy who decides something must happen. And what's funny about this is that he disappears for like a big chunk of the story because he's actually fighting another battle somewhere else, which is like very typical in B2B, where you might have your CMOs like, hey, this needs to happen, like starts someone on that quest and then has to go and fight some other battle with like the VP of engineering to get like some feature out or something like that. And on the flip side, you might have your champion that's kind of like pushing and pushing for this to happen. And you'll have the people like Boromir who want to take like this for themselves because they have some like competing interest in this initiative that's going on. And ultimately, the long story short is, while we can take a lot of inspiration from B2C to drive our B2B campaigns, we have to embrace the fact that in B2B, it's a lot more complex. There are a lot more people, and different people will have different affinities to your go-to-market motions, right? So for Lucid, their product is awesome. People are going to sign up for the product. You're going to have a ton of users who want to use the product, want to get value from it, so you can have this bottom-up motion. But then your functional buyers, like the VP of engineering, this VP of marketing, they're not necessarily like living in the product, but they're probably going to register for a webinar to understand like, how is my team getting value from this? Why should I think about buying a plan for my team? And then you have the IT decision maker, like the procurement team. They're never going to log into Lucid, ever. They're never going to log into a webinar. They're just waiting for an enterprise rep to give them a call and tell them, hey, this is why you should sign up for an enterprise plan. It's like IT consolidation play, like the pretty standard enterprise sell. And so understanding that you have all of these motions going on within an account is critical to then be able to empower the reps by giving them the right data to understand what is the right play to run for this account to be able to win the account. So the long story short is, embrace the complexity, use data as an alignment tool. And that's pretty much it. We'll be at our booth for Q&A if we don't have time, but otherwise we're here and more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.